Aria Sullivan slammed the apartment door behind her as the landlord's warning echoed through the cramped space. The room smelled faintly of burnt toast and old carpet, mixed with the tension of weeks spent scraping by. 8 years. Gone just like that, she muttered, tugging her scarf tighter. She wanted to feel despair, but instead, a spark of determination burned. She couldn't cry herself into submission. She had to act, had to survive. Her phone buzzed. A single email. Subject line: urgent. Music therapist position in Seoul. Immediate start. Aria stared at it. Seoul, Korea. A world away from everything familiar. But the words practically leapt off the screen. Opportunity to transform lives through music therapy. Immediate placement at the Horizon Foundation. Her pulse raced. Within seconds, she typed back. I accept. Days later, she was on a plane, leaving behind the city that had chewed her up and spat her out. Seoul's skyline glittered like shards of glass in the morning sun, a chaotic mosaic of skyscrapers and neon. Instead of fear, Aria felt something sharper: purpose. She had children waiting for her, children who couldn't speak, trapped inside silence. Music could be their bridge. She just had to find it. The Horizon Foundation building was sleek, almost sterile, yet alive with restless energy. Director Kim greeted her with a tight smile. Miss Sullivan, we're glad you're here. 12 children, various communication disorders. Your work is essential. Aria nodded, swallowing the lump of nerves. She wanted to say more, but words felt heavy. Her mission demanded action. Her first encounters were chaotic. Some children ran from her, some hid behind furniture, and one small boy barely blinked. Jin Hae, 8 years old. He huddled in the corner, fingers twitching, eyes darting. Silence clung to him like armor. Aria knelt gently, guitar in hand, speaking softly. Hi, I'm Aria. I know it's loud here. You don't have to talk. I just want to make some music with you. Nothing. She tried again, tapping a soft rhythm on the floor, humming along, letting the vibration travel toward him. Hours passed. His body barely moved. Frustration nipped at her confidence, but she held steady, remembering the first rule: connection, not control. That night, sleep eluded her. She replayed every twitch, every fleeting glance. I can reach him. I will, she whispered into the darkness. Her apartment felt colder than Chicago ever had, but determination burned hotter. Then came the invitation. A gala hosted by none other than Kwon Hyun, a man whispered about with both fear and reverence, the shadowed titan of Seoul's underworld. She hadn't expected to attend, but the foundation's major donors insisted. The ballroom was dazzling. Crystal chandeliers glittered above a crowd built of wealth, influence, and unspoken tension. Aria's pulse quickened as she scanned for her responsibility. There he was, Jin Hae, overwhelmed by the chaos, hiding behind a pillar, trembling at every laugh, every flash of light. Her stomach twisted. She didn't hesitate. Jin Hae, she whispered, kneeling carefully. He didn't answer. I know it's loud. I know it's scary. Can we make a song together? Just us. Her fingers pressed gently on a small keyboard she had tucked into her bag. Slowly, impossibly, he edged closer, hands trembling above the keys. She hummed beside him, matching his cautious rhythm. And then, just barely, he pressed one note. The room seemed to pause. Aria smiled softly, careful not to startle him. One note. That's all it takes. Across the room, Hyun watched. Dark eyes narrowed, not with anger but curiosity. No one had ever reached his son this way. He didn't understand her methods, but he felt the effect, a warmth stirring somewhere he'd long forgotten. He approached, presence commanding yet restrained. You're the therapist, he said low, voice measured. I'm Kwon Hyun. Aria's heartbeat quickened. Yes, I work with your son. He responded today. Hyun glanced at Jin Hae, who now hummed a simple melody, lips twitching with concentration. He rarely responds to anyone, Hyun said. Yet you reach him. I don't force him, Aria replied. I listen. That's the difference. He studied her, then nodded. Dinner. Tomorrow night. I want to understand more. She didn't know if it was a threat or an invitation, but she said yes. Somehow, she already knew this would be the next step. Danger and opportunity intertwined, and she was stepping right into it. Back in her small apartment, Aria sank onto the bed, heart still racing. She thought of Jin Hae's trembling fingers, the way his eyes had flickered with curiosity. A spark had ignited, one she intended to nurture. She didn't yet know the storms waiting outside the foundation walls, the enemies in shadow, or the man who would both terrify and enthrall her. But one truth was certain, nothing would stop her from reaching this boy. Her phone buzzed with a reminder, CTA, subscribe, comment, and like if you want to follow Jin Hae's journey. She laughed quietly. Even here, halfway across the world, her life was already shifting. The next morning brought nervous anticipation. Aria dressed simply, guitar in hand, ready to meet Hyun for dinner. Every step was a mix of fear and excitement. She didn't yet know the path ahead, but she knew it would demand everything: courage, heart, and music. Somewhere deep in the city, Kwon Hyun prepared too. Vulnerable? Never. Yet she had touched something in his son and in him that no one ever had. As Aria paused at the doorway, she whispered to herself, one note at a time. The next day, Aria walked into the Horizon Foundation with a mix of determination and nerves. Jin Hae was waiting, seated at a small table with a keyboard. He didn't look up when she entered, fingers drumming lightly on the surface as if testing the air. She crouched beside him, smiling gently. "Morning, Jin Hae," she said softly. "Shall we try again?" He barely reacted. His eyes flicked toward her, then quickly away. Aria took a deep breath. One note. That's all I want today. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, he pressed a key. A single, trembling note. Aria matched it with her own hum. Good. That's it. That's perfect. Why, you do this? Jin Hae whispered, voice hoarse and small, barely audible. Aria froze. She hadn't expected words so soon. I want to understand you, she said. Music is our way to talk without words. He pressed another note, then a third, each one slightly more confident. She hummed and clapped with him, letting him lead. For the first time, he seemed in control, in command of his own small victories. Meanwhile, Kwon Hyun was observing from the hallway. His expression was unreadable, though a flicker of something he rarely allowed himself, curiosity, showed in his eyes. No one had ever coaxed Jin Hae to speak, not even the finest tutors, not even the harshest tutors. Aria Sullivan, this foreign woman, had done it with patience and music. Days passed. Jin Hae's progress was slow but undeniable. He hummed longer, pressed keys with more confidence, and occasionally whispered words she could almost understand. Aria spent her evenings logging every interaction, analyzing the patterns, and planning her next sessions. But the fragile rhythm of hope was shattered one afternoon. Aria had just left the foundation when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She answered cautiously. Hello. A distorted voice spoke, cold and mocking. Miss Sullivan. You are far too close to things you do not understand. Leave the boy, or the consequences will follow. Her heart hammered. She hung up, palms sweating. It was the first real warning she'd received, and it came from a shadow that smelled of power and danger. Aria knew she couldn't run. Not now. Not when Jin Hae depended on her. That evening at the dinner Kwon Hyun had requested, tension curled through the elegant restaurant like smoke. Hyun sat across from her, expression carefully neutral. You seem fearless, he said, his dark eyes locked on hers. Or maybe reckless. Aria leaned back, keeping her composure. I'm neither. I care about your son. That's all. Hyun's lips twitched in the faintest smile. Most people in my world do not care about what they cannot control. You do. Their conversation danced around threats and intentions, but beneath it ran an unspoken current, curiosity, mutual respect, and something dangerously close to trust. She felt it, and though she tried to hide it, she couldn't deny a flutter of adrenaline at being this close to a man so dangerous, so commanding. Back at the foundation, Jin Hae's progress continued, but the warning weighed on Aria. She noticed small signs, a flicker of fear in his eyes when the wind rattled the windows, hesitance when strangers approached. She whispered during sessions, "It's okay. I'm here. No one can hurt you while I'm here." The breakthrough came one rainy afternoon. Jin Hae was seated at the keyboard, hesitant as ever. Aria sang a simple tune, her voice soft and soothing. He matched her melody, adding his own hesitant variations. Then, barely above a whisper, he said clearly, "Aria, stay." She froze, breath caught in her throat. Words. He had said a real word. Her eyes filled, but she held it together, kneeling beside him. "I will, Jin Hae. I promise. I'm not going anywhere." Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She ignored it, focusing entirely on the small boy beside her. Danger could wait. For now, the music was what mattered. But the danger didn't wait. One evening, as she walked back to her apartment, a van screeched to a halt beside her. Doors swung open. Two masked men lunged. Adrenaline surged. She ducked instinctively, trying to reach for her phone. The men grabbed her, shoving her inside. The van sped off before she could scream. Inside, the vehicle smelled of leather and cold metal. Who are you?" she demanded, voice trembling but defiant. A shadowed figure leaned forward. "You're meddling in affairs far beyond your understanding. Leave the boy alone, or this world will consume you." Aria's mind raced. The words of warning were now flesh and blood, immediate and terrifying. But she refused to crumble. "I will not leave him. Not now. Not ever." Moments later, the van skidded to a halt. The doors burst open. Two of Hyun's men dragged her out, their expressions tense but relieved. Kwon Hyun himself appeared, coat billowing slightly, eyes hard but with relief faintly flickering. "You are reckless," he said, his voice sharp. "But you've proven you care. That I cannot punish." Aria's legs shook as she stood, soaked in rain and adrenaline. Jin Hae needs me," she said. "I can't turn away." Hyun's expression softened minutely. "I see that now. Stay close. But understand, the world around you is not gentle." That night, Aria sat with Jin Hae at the keyboard. The rain tapped softly against the windows, a rhythm that matched her pulse. She didn't tell him about the kidnapping attempt. She didn't want to fracture his fragile trust. Instead, she held his small hands gently, guiding him through a melody. "You are safe here," she whispered. "Always." He pressed a key, then another, finally adding a small note of his own. She smiled, holding back tears. Each note was a victory, a defiance of the danger waiting outside the walls. Later, Aria pulled out her phone, a subtle grin forming. "CTA, if you're enjoying Jin Hae's journey, like, comment, and subscribe to follow the story." She hit send, knowing that even in a world full of shadows, there were ways to reach hearts beyond the walls. As she closed her laptop, she glanced at Jin Hae asleep against the keyboard, head resting on his arms. Tomorrow, she thought, we go further. Tomorrow, we break another wall. And maybe, just maybe, the darkness outside won't seem so terrifying when music binds them together. Aria woke to the faint glow of sunlight spilling across the horizon foundation. Her muscles ached from the previous night's ordeal, but she refused to dwell on it. Jin Hae was already awake, seated at the small keyboard, fingers moving lightly over the keys as if testing the world. He looked up, eyes searching hers. "You came back," he said softly, almost in disbelief. Aria crouched beside him, smoothing his hair back gently. "I told you, Jin Hae. I promised. I'm not going anywhere. Not after everything we've done together." He pressed a few notes, a hesitant melody, and then added a small variation. Aria hummed along, matching him. The music was their secret language, one no threat could touch. Later, Kwon Hyun arrived unexpectedly at the foundation. Aria tensed, unsure what he wanted. But he didn't speak immediately, he observed silently. Jin Hae froze, fingers hovering above the keys. Hyun's presence was commanding, yet something in his gaze was careful, restrained. You've done well, he said finally, voice low. He trusts you. More than I expected anyone ever could. Aria's heart thumped. Thank you, but trust is fragile. It takes time. Hyun nodded, then hesitated. Time is a luxury we don't always have. I need to know you can handle what's coming. Aria met his gaze without flinching. I can. I will. Jin Hae needs me. That's reason enough. Hyun's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. Very well. But understand, this world will test you. And it will test him. The next few days were filled with progress, but tension simmered just below the surface. Aria noticed small changes in Jin Hae, moments of anxiety, sudden flinches, and whispers of fear. She worked tirelessly, building routines and using music as a safe space. Then came the unexpected. A new message, encrypted and ominous, slipped under her apartment door. Stop. Or the boy suffers. Or worse. Aria clenched her fists. She felt a surge of protective rage, tempered only by her calm resolve. I will not be intimidated, she whispered to herself. I won't let fear dictate us. That evening, she prepared for her first private session at Hyun's estate. Security was tight, guards at every corner, silent and watchful. Jin Hae hesitated at the doorway, glancing at her. You'll be safe, she assured him. I'm right here. Inside the sprawling home, the atmosphere was heavy. The grandeur was intimidating, but Aria focused on Jin Hae. She set up the keyboard in a quiet corner, dimming the lights to create a safe cocoon. Play what you feel, she instructed softly. No one's watching. Just you and the music. For the first time, Jin Hae closed his eyes fully, letting his fingers glide over the keys. Aria hummed and sang along, guiding him through a simple melody. Slowly, notes turned into phrases, phrases into small songs. The breakthrough was tangible. For a fleeting moment, the outside world ceased to exist. Hyun watched from the doorway, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. He trusts you, he murmured more to himself than to her. Aria glanced up. And he should. Everyone deserves to be trusted. He stepped closer, voice almost gentle. You've brought light into a world I thought was impossible to illuminate. The words hung between them, charged with a tension neither fully acknowledged. Aria's cheeks warmed, but she stayed focused on Jin Hae. Their eyes met briefly, and in that silent exchange, a subtle understanding formed, danger and desire, care and caution, all interwoven. Days later, the warnings escalated. 2 men in dark suits were spotted near the estate, lurking outside the perimeter. Aria's heart pounded as she alerted Hyun. They're here, she said. They're watching. Hyun's expression hardened. You're right. They're after you for him. We need to be prepared. The next night, as Aria helped Jin Hae practice a new melody, the estate's alarms blared. Red lights pulsed, security radios crackled. Aria's stomach dropped. Jin Hae, stay close. Hyun appeared in an instant, drawing the boys back from the corridor. Guards moved with precision, confronting the intruders. Shouts echoed through the halls, a cacophony that would have terrified anyone else. Aria held her ground, fingers brushing Jin Hae's shoulder. We're okay, she whispered, though her voice trembled slightly. In the chaos, one intruder broke through. Aria acted without thinking, placing herself between him and Jin Hae. She was struck, pain flaring sharply, but adrenaline and instinct kept her upright. Hyun's men subdued the attacker quickly, dragging him away. Hyun himself knelt beside her, checking for injuries. You're reckless, he said, voice low, but there was concern undeniable in his dark eyes. I couldn't let him, not him, Aria gasped. I promised. Hyun's hand lingered briefly on hers, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. You've proven you are more than capable, he said softly. And more than I expected. Jin Hae, wide-eyed and shaken, looked up at her. Aria, you safe? She smiled through the ache, brushing hair from his forehead. I'm safe. We're safe. That's what matters. That night, as Aria cleaned her wounds and recorded the day's therapy notes, she couldn't shake the intensity of the emotions swirling through her. Fear, triumph, attraction, and an unspoken connection with Hyun that made her pulse quicken. She pulled out her phone, typing quickly, CTA. Don't miss Jin Hae's next breakthrough. Like, comment, and subscribe to see how far our music can go. Outside, the city was quiet, but Aria knew it was temporary. Danger would always lurk around the edges of their fragile progress. Yet in the small cocoon of music, laughter, and trust, there was hope, a hope she would fight for, whatever the cost. And somewhere in the shadows, Kwon Hyun watched over them both, realizing that in protecting Jin Hae, he had also begun to protect something unfamiliar in himself, a heart capable of care, connection, and maybe, just maybe, love.
The sun had barely risen when Aria arrived at the Horizon Foundation. Her body ached from the previous night's chaos, but she refused to let fatigue or fear slow her down. Jin Hae was already there, sitting at the keyboard, eyes flickering nervously toward the windows as though expecting the world to erupt into danger again. "Morning," she whispered, crouching beside him. "Ready for today?" He nodded, hands hovering over the keys. "Yes, music." As they began, Aria noticed a subtle change. Jin Hae's movements were more deliberate, his confidence growing with each note. She hummed along, encouraging him, allowing the music to build gradually into something expressive and full of feeling. His fingers flew over the keys, notes weaving together into a melody that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Hyun arrived quietly, observing from the doorway. He had never let anyone else see the side of him, the way his son's laughter and music could momentarily soften the edges of his shadowed presence. Aria caught his glance and smiled faintly, a silent acknowledgement. They were in this together, against a world that would not relent. Then, just as the music reached a gentle crescendo, the estate alarms blared again. Red lights pulsed violently, and the air filled with the scent of panic. Aria's pulse raced. "Jin Hae, stay close," she shouted, guiding him toward the center of the room. Hyun was already moving, his presence commanding and swift. "Aria, cover him," he barked, drawing her close as guards streamed into the hallways. 2 masked men had breached the perimeter. Chaos erupted as shouts, commands, and the clash of confrontation filled the estate. Aria's training and instincts kicked in. She kept Jin Hae protected, using her small frame and quick reflexes to shield him from the intruder's reach. A guard shouted warnings. Hyun subdued one attacker with terrifying efficiency. But one of the intruders broke through, lunging toward Jin Hae. Aria reacted instantly, placing herself between the boy and danger. Pain shot through her side, but she didn't falter. "You promised," she yelled, voice cracking. "I won't let him be hurt." Hyun's men finally restrained the intruder. The threat neutralized, he rushed to Aria, concern etched across his face. "You're reckless," he said, voice low, but there was something softer beneath the edge, a warmth that surprised both of them. I can't leave him," she gasped. "I promised." Hyun's dark eyes softened minutely. "I know," he said. "I see now. Your courage is beyond anything I expected." Jin Hae, wide-eyed and trembling, looked at Aria. "Safe, Aria?" She smiled through her pain, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Safe," she whispered. "We're safe." That evening, the 3 of them sat in the music room. Aria guided Jin Hae through a gentle melody, his fingers moving confidently over the keys. Each note was an assertion of trust, defiance, and healing. She hummed along, weaving her voice into his, and finally, Jin Hae spoke in full sentences. "I like music. It makes me happy," he said, looking directly at her. Aria's heart swelled. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she smiled, keeping her composure for him. "I'm so proud of you, Jin Hae. That's amazing." Hyun knelt beside them, his expression softened by rare vulnerability. "He speaks because of you," he said to Aria. "And I see things differently now. About trust. About family. About hope." Aria felt a jolt of something unexpected, connection, recognition, and the faintest hint of love stirring. "We built this together," she said softly. The following weeks were a blend of cautious normalcy and quiet triumph. Jin Hae continued to flourish, speaking more, laughing more, interacting more with the world. Aria and Hyun's relationship deepened, moving from mutual respect to something far more intimate, yet restrained by circumstance and danger. Then came the final test. One rival faction attempted to strike the estate directly. This time, Aria was ready. Hyun's men secured the perimeter while Aria kept Jin Hae and the younger children safe in a soundproof room. The sounds of gunfire and shouts outside were terrifying, but she focused on music, singing softly to Jin Hae, keeping his mind tethered to safety. By nightfall, the danger passed. No one was harmed, and the intruders were driven off. Hyun turned to Aria, gratitude and admiration shining in his eyes. "You've faced what few would dare," he said. "And you never faltered." "I can't express how much that means." Aria shook her head, exhausted but resolute. "I didn't falter because I had to protect him. Jin Hae, he's worth everything." Hyun stepped closer, voice low. "And you are worth everything too." Days later, in a quiet, intimate moment, he proposed. No grand ballrooms or extravagant gestures, just the three of them, Jin Hae grinning as he handed Aria a small ring, his own way of acknowledging her place in their family. She accepted, tears streaming, and for the first time, they felt complete. Years passed. Jin Hae thrived in school, blossomed into a confident, joyful young boy. Aria continued her music therapy, expanding the foundation's reach, helping children like Jin Hae across Seoul. Hyun transitioned parts of his empire into legitimate ventures, guided by lessons learned from love, trust, and music. One quiet anniversary evening, the family returned to the gala ballroom where it all began. Jin Hae, now a teenager, played a soft melody on the grand piano. Aria and Hyun stood beside him, hands intertwined, hearts full. The room seemed to glow with memory, reflection, and triumph. Aria leaned into Hyun, whispering one note, one step at a time. Hyun kissed her temple softly. And every note mattered. The music swelled. Jin Hae's laughter echoed, warm and bright. Their journey, fraught with danger, tension, and doubt, had led to a life full of love, healing, and connection. The world outside remained uncertain, but within the sanctuary of their family, nothing else mattered. Aria pulled out her phone one last time, smiling as she typed, "Thank you for following Jin Hae's journey. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Every note of this story is just the beginning." And as the melody played on, the three of them, teacher, son, and father, sat together, united in harmony, love, and hope, ready for whatever the future held.